Imagine this. You've been spending time with her, connecting, enjoying the moments. But suddenly, something changes. She starts pulling away. What went wrong? Why does it feel like the whole vibe shifted? Well, if you've ever wondered how a woman reacts when she realizes you've lost interest, trust me, you're not the only one. This is more than just a feeling. It's psychology at play. Subscribe to the channel, it's free. And today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of female psychology. You'll want to stick around till the end because some of these insights might just blow your mind. Let's go. Point 1. Emotional withdrawal. When a woman realizes you've lost interest, her first reaction is often emotional withdrawal. This is an instinctive coping mechanism, a way of protecting herself from potential hurt. She might stop opening up, sharing her thoughts, or expressing affection as she once did. Essentially, she pulls back emotionally to avoid investing further in something she feels may not be reciprocated. For example, let's say you were once the guy who would text her throughout the day, make plans for weekends, and share little details of your life. At some point, she notices you've stopped putting in as much effort. Maybe you don't reply as quickly, and when you do, it's often with short, uninterested responses. She feels the shift and starts to emotionally withdraw. At first, she may try to fill the gap by texting more or being extra thoughtful, but if your lack of interest continues, she'll start to emotionally disconnect. This can look like her becoming less affectionate or not initiating conversations anymore. She might stop texting you first or give you distant responses like, "I'm fine," when you ask how her day was. The energy she once put into the relationship now fades, as she's trying to protect herself from further emotional disappointment. From a psychological standpoint, emotional withdrawal is a self-preservation strategy. When someone senses that the relationship they've been investing in is no longer being valued, their mind begins to shield their emotions to avoid further hurt. If a woman feels her emotional investment isn't being returned, her instinct is to reduce vulnerability. Instead of giving more, she starts holding back, whether consciously or subconsciously. This can be frustrating for men because it's not always easy to recognize the shift in behavior. You might not notice she's pulling away until it's already happening. But from her perspective, this emotional withdrawal is a direct result of feeling unwanted or ignored. Why it happens? Protecting her heart. She doesn't want to keep pouring into someone who isn't giving her the same level of attention or care. Fear of rejection. The more she invests emotionally, the more vulnerable she feels to being rejected or hurt. Preserving dignity. If she feels your interest is waning, she may choose to pull back rather than face potential rejection. When a woman starts emotionally withdrawing, it's a clear signal that something has shifted. If you care about her, you need to be aware of these signs and consider whether your actions or inactions may be the cause. The longer this withdrawal goes unaddressed, the harder it becomes to reconnect. It's a crucial moment for you to either step up and show interest or risk losing the emotional connection entirely. Pause. Have you ever found yourself chasing someone who was no longer interested? It's like trying to catch a fish that already swam away. Let's be real, it's frustrating. Now, this emotional withdrawal is just the start. What happens next might surprise you, and trust me, you won't see this one coming. Point 2. The subtle power struggle. When a woman realizes you've lost interest, one of the next phases she may enter is a subtle power struggle. This is a psychological response to the shift in dynamics in the relationship. It's her way of testing the waters to see if the relationship can be salvaged or if you are completely checked out. The reason it's subtle is that she won't necessarily do this overtly or aggressively, but she'll introduce small challenges to see how you react. This phase is about regaining some control and figuring out whether you still care enough to fight for the connection. Example, imagine you've been dating a woman for a while, and she starts noticing that you're not as present or engaged as you once were. In response, she may initiate a situation that tests your level of interest. For example, she might make a casual comment about spending time with her friends instead of you, or she might purposely take longer to reply to your texts. She wants to see if you will start to chase her, or if you'll just accept the shift without putting in effort to reignite the connection. It could also look like her pulling away even more to see how long it will take for you to step up. For instance, if she cancels plans at the last minute or becomes more distant, she's waiting for you to take charge and reassert your desire to be with her. If you don't take the bait, she might escalate the situation by being even more distant or disengaged to see if you'll try harder to rekindle the spark. Psychological insight. At this stage, the woman is still emotionally invested, but she's testing your level of interest. She may not be consciously aware of it, but on a deeper level, she's trying to understand whether your initial attraction was genuine or if you've moved on. The power struggle is less about manipulation and more about needing reassurance. She's looking for a sign that you're still willing to put in the effort to win her back or that you still find her valuable. Why it happens. Self-validation. She wants to know if you still find her attractive and worth the effort. It's a way to test if the relationship can still be salvaged. Fear of being replaced. If she senses that you're losing interest, she may test you to ensure she isn't easily replaced or forgotten. Re-establishing control. Women often have a subconscious desire to feel that they still hold some influence in a relationship. By testing your reactions, she can gauge whether she still has control over the dynamic between you two. What you should watch for. When you notice subtle changes in her behavior, like pulling away, playing hard to get, or showing signs of indifference, it's a signal that she's testing the waters. If you don't respond to these subtle tests, she might escalate the challenge, making it harder for you to reestablish the connection. Alternatively, if you do respond by showing more interest, she'll test you further, seeing if your actions align with your words. Pause. Have you ever tried to play it cool thinking, "Oh, I'll just stay distant and see what happens"? Newsflash, it might not go the way you think. So when she tests you, and you don't react in the way she hopes, guess what? This is where the emotional roller coaster intensifies, and things can escalate fast. Are you ready for the next phase? Hold on tight, seeing if your actions align with your words. Point 3. Indifference or silent treatment. When a woman realizes you've lost interest, one of the most painful and powerful reactions she might have is to respond with indifference or the silent treatment. This behavior typically emerges after she has processed the emotional withdrawal and subtle power struggle. It's her way of coping with the situation by shutting down and emotionally detaching from you. This stage is particularly hard to deal with because it's not just that she's pulling away. She's actively choosing not to engage with you in any meaningful way. Example. Let's say you've been in a relationship for a while, but you've stopped showing the same enthusiasm and care. You've become less communicative and emotionally distant, and over time she notices. She may initially try to get your attention by texting or making an effort to talk, but after a while, she realizes you're not responding with the same investment. Eventually, she stops reaching out altogether. You might send a text asking how her day was, and instead of getting a thoughtful response, you get a one-word reply like, "Fine," or worse, no reply at all. She may even ignore your calls, leave messages unread, or refuse to make plans. The silence becomes a form of punishment. It's her way of saying, "I can't keep investing emotionally in this if you're not doing the same." She's emotionally checked out, but unlike emotional withdrawal, where she might have been actively testing or pulling back, now she's simply disengaging completely. The silent treatment or indifference is one of the most powerful tools of emotional detachment, especially when someone feels hurt or abandoned. It's a way for her to protect herself from further disappointment by refusing to engage in an emotionally draining situation. The silence isn't just about not talking. It's a way of asserting control and distancing herself from someone who she perceives as no longer valuing her. It also gives her time to evaluate whether she wants to keep investing in a relationship that seems one-sided. From a psychological standpoint, this behavior is rooted in a mix of self-preservation and emotional self-protection. She might feel rejected or hurt by your lack of interest, and as a result, she starts disengaging as a defense mechanism, creating space between herself and the emotional hurt. Why it happens? Self-preservation. She's protecting herself from further emotional hurt. If she feels that you've emotionally checked out, She may pull back to avoid giving you more of herself, knowing it could lead to more disappointment. Lost hope. If she's tried to communicate and show affection without getting the same response, she may reach a point where she decides it's not worth trying anymore. She becomes indifferent because she doesn't see the point in continuing to fight for someone who isn't fully invested. What you should watch for. Indifference or the silent treatment is a clear sign that she's disengaged and is no longer emotionally invested in trying to maintain the relationship. If you notice this shift, it's important to act quickly before the emotional distance becomes permanent. The longer the silence continues, the harder it becomes to break through and reconnect. Pause. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't care, she's the one who lost interest first, I get it. But let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone slowly slip away and it left you questioning everything? The cold shoulder can sting. Trust me. Indifference isn't always the end, though. In fact, there's still one last twist to this whole thing, and it's a game changer. Point 4. The moment of clarity. The moment of clarity is a pivotal turning point that often occurs when a woman fully recognizes that you've lost interest, and she processes this realization on a deeper level. This moment is like a light bulb turning on. It's the moment when everything becomes clear to her. She may have sensed your distance or lack of effort for a while, but now everything falls into place. She understands that the relationship has shifted, and in many cases, this clarity marks the end of her emotional investment. This is the moment when her mindset changes from questioning the situation to accepting it for what it is. For example, imagine you and this woman have been spending a lot of time together, but over the past few weeks, you've grown more distant. Maybe you've been less attentive, not making the same efforts to stay in touch, and the quality of your time together has diminished. She might have suspected something was off, but she kept hoping things would change. Then, one day, she experiences the moment of clarity. Perhaps it happens when you cancel plans last minute without a solid reason, or maybe you stop initiating conversations altogether. It could even be something as simple as a conversation where you don't seem as engaged or interested in her life anymore. At that moment, everything clicks for her. She realizes that your actions are no longer aligned with what you once had. The moment of clarity is when she realizes that your lack of interest isn't temporary, it's permanent. This moment is often accompanied by a mix of emotions: shock, sadness, acceptance, and sometimes even relief. It's a realization that forces her to face the truth of the situation. It's no longer about hoping things will improve, but about accepting that the relationship has changed, possibly beyond repair. Psychological insight. The moment of clarity happens when emotional confusion and doubt are replaced with understanding and certainty. Before this moment, she may have been in a state of limbo, unsure whether you were pulling away due to stress, temporary circumstances, or something more permanent. However, once this clarity hits, she understands the reality of the situation. You are no longer emotionally invested. This is a critical moment in female psychology, as it shifts her mindset from hope and effort to either detachment or acceptance. It forces her to come to terms with the truth, and it often triggers a response where she either completely withdraws emotionally or makes the decision to move on entirely. Why it happens. Consistent signs of disinterest. The moment of clarity often arises after observing a series of consistent behaviors that indicate you've lost interest, like late replies, missed calls, or a lack of enthusiasm when you're together. Emotional disconnect. She's been trying to hold on to the connection, but over time, she realizes you're emotionally unavailable or distant. Once she fully processes this, the clarity sets in. What you should watch for. When a woman reaches the moment of clarity, she may start to act with a certain finality. If you notice that she's becoming more distant, less invested, or even openly resigned to the situation, it's a strong sign that she has reached this point. If you try to reignite the connection at this stage, she may show little emotional response, as she's already mentally moved on. Pause. I know, this is tough. But remember, it's all part of the game of love, right? Who knew relationships were such a psychological chess match? Now that we've unpacked this emotional journey, the real question is, what can you do to stop this from happening in the first place? It all boils down to one thing. but you're going to want to stick around for that. Point 5. How to prevent this from happening. The best way to prevent a woman from reaching the point of emotional withdrawal and disengagement due to your disinterest is to actively maintain emotional connection and show consistent effort throughout the relationship. While it's natural for dynamics to change over time, maintaining a healthy, communicative, and engaged relationship is essential for preventing the inevitable realization that you've lost interest. The key is to stay attuned to her emotional needs, communicate openly, and show that you value the connection. Example: imagine you're in a committed relationship with a woman, and while everything starts off strong, you begin to get comfortable and stop putting in as much effort. You stop planning dates, become less communicative, and seem to take her for granted. She notices this change, but initially thinks it's just a phase or that you're going through something difficult. However, over time, she begins to feel unimportant, neglected, and confused about your intentions. Psychological insight: preventing a woman from reaching emotional disengagement is based on one simple principle: consistency in emotional effort. People, particularly women in romantic relationships, need to feel valued, wanted, and important. The effort in maintaining this connection doesn't always mean grand gestures, but rather regular, thoughtful actions that reassure her of your interest and commitment. Why it happens? Complacency? After the initial excitement of a relationship wears off, some people fall into complacency. They stop putting in the effort they did at the beginning, thinking that the connection will naturally last without needing attention. Lack of communication. When communication starts to dwindle or becomes less meaningful, emotional disconnection sets in. Over time, a lack of honest and open communication can lead to misunderstandings, and one person might feel ignored or misunderstood. What you should watch for. Avoiding complacency. Be mindful of the moments when you start to take the relationship for granted. If you notice yourself becoming complacent, make a conscious effort to shift back into a mode of engagement. Notice emotional distance. Pay attention to any signs of emotional withdrawal from her. If she seems less communicative or disengaged, it's crucial to address it quickly before the gap widens. If you found these insights useful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content on understanding female psychology. We've only scratched the surface today, and there's so much more to dive into. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced something like this. I'd love to hear your story. And remember, relationships are a journey. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep learning.